All right, folks, you know the drill. If there's no chat to the side of me, it's an offline segment. I'm not wearing pants. I currently have allergies. I have a cough. It's not COVID. I also have a headache. Really falling apart over here. But worse things are happening elsewhere. I wanted to talk about this very quickly because something happened in the wake of a recent tragedy that I found. I don't know if interesting is the right word, but at the very least, noteworthy. So you probably know. But there was a shooting, a mass shooting, just earlier today in Sunset Park. 10 people were shot, 5 critically wounded. This just happened. I don't think there's much worthwhile to be said about yet another mass shooting in America outside of any sort of uncovered political motivation, which we do not yet have. The only thing that I'd like to emphasize, which is the same thing I emphasize every time a mass shooting happens, is that while they are tragic and they are preventable, and they happen way too frequently. I mean, any frequency at all is too frequently, but still. Do remember that the most sensational violence is not the most common violence. Mass shooting deaths are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the deaths caused by firearms, and even then, more people die of heart disease and so on. Just always keep that in mind. Sensationalism and reality don't always match each other. Still, a tragedy when it does happen. I saw this on Twitter. This was actually how I found out about the shooting because I hadn't been online that much. But at Uber, turn off surges in Sunset Park. People are scared, let them get out safely. And what this is that in the area of the shooting, people are trying to flee. They open up Uber, and the fare price is astronomical, $68.49. I don't know how long the scheduled trip would have been. It says the car is 4 minutes away, and it looks like the car would have taken up here. I don't know the exact proportion here, but the point is that the prices went up, of course. And, it's a large thread, and people are blaming Uber and so on. And I want to talk about this really quickly because there's some adjacent stuff here, and I feel like it's interesting to talk about. Now, the purpose of surge pricing with Uber is a very simple reflection of basic supply-demand economic theory, that if demand for an Uber is rising in an area, therefore the Ubers are worth more, so they can charge more, and you would try to find some kind of equilibrium point where you would charge the highest amount you can for an Uber and still sell as many Uber rides as is possible. Very simple stuff, not even capitalism, just a basic function of markets. The only difference is that in the modern world, this is something that can be done algorithmically. It doesn't require manual price changing, which is, of course, what happened here. The surge pricing that we see here is not Uber making the choice to increase the price. Of course, it's just a product of the algorithm seeing an unusual number of searches for an Uber in that area at that time. So, what's my prescription here? That it's not Uber's fault? Well, this specifically isn't Uber's fault. However, I think it's worth taking a look at how the ultra-efficient model of modern commerce is very bad at dealing with emergencies. So we kind of saw this in the in the Suez Canal when it got blocked for a while, blocked something like 10 to 12% of all global trade. Billions were lost every day. And I want to give credit where it's due. In terms of efficiency and scope, the modern day economy and all of its, component parts, up to and including Uber pricing, is ridiculously, supremely efficient compared to what we've had in the past when operating under optimal conditions. Now that's kind of a cheat, right? Well, this is the best system when everything's working well. Well, what happens when it's not working well? If you want to play, Marvel superhero cape shit battle over it and determine what elements of this are worse than what other elements and compare and contrast, you can. But you would need an econ degree for that. And I have a headache and also no econ degree. So let's not. I do want to say, though, that in a purely abstract sense, if you were to strip away everything else possible, you have a private company, Uber, determining how to price their rides. The idea of surge pricing is reasonable in line with existing market expectations. It makes sense. It doesn't seem to me to be particularly exploitative uh, inherently, though it's often exploitative in its outcomes. And I think what we're seeing here is the outrage that people feel when you have one of those externalities that make surge pricing come across as exceptionally cruel. Price gouging, when you arbitrarily raise the price on something that you sell in response to a tragedy or whatever, that can be illegal depending on how it's done. With regards to this, it's more like competitive bidding. Like everyone's just casting their lot in like a very complicated, algorithmically determined eBay listing of an Uber ride that you're trying to find your way through. I feel like I'm rambling. I'm sorry. My head hurts. Listen, let me just get directly at the point without any of the sort of preceding run up. Okay. We have a problem with a lack of contingencies and a lack of throughput in our systems when an emergency happens. The goal of a company is to make as much money as possible. I think that's pretty straightforward. That's its goal. Whatever it can do to get there is best. And that often involves cutting corners. And that can be an efficient process, but sometimes inefficiencies and redundancies are necessary when you're dealing with systems that can break down. Let me give you an example with another kind of public transit, okay? Let's say you have a metro system. If you're a company, the goal of a metro system in terms of its operation and its cost is to make the most amount of money while spending the least amount of money as possible. Obviously, it gets more complicated than that sometimes, but that's the gist. And maybe after doing a bunch of math, your analysts tell you the best way to do that is to have a train run down a route every 28 minutes. And that keeps people reasonably happy. If you had it run any more than that, you would lose money even if more people got on the trains because it was more available. You'd still be paying out more for more trains running. You'd have to pay for additional costs, parts, repair, labor, operation, salaries, the whole 9 yards. But what is acceptable at a 28-minute point is unacceptable at a 56-minute point, if a train breaks down or if something goes wrong. And when you're running at the most efficient throughput possible, well, efficiency only works as long as all the preceding elements function properly. And as soon as they don't, it doesn't. Redundancies are really good for public infrastructure. You never want the absolute minimum number of public restrooms in a given square. You never want the absolute minimum number of buses that you can run down a route, or the absolute minimum number of, I don't know, available parking spaces for a given venue. You always want redundancy, overflow, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know, for example, if, let's say, there would be a sudden surge in immediate need for personal transportation when taxis effectively no longer, not that they no longer exist, it's just, let's be fair, they've been, sort of nudged out of the market a good bit. When Uber is essentially subsidized the inadequate internal transportation of many American cities, and then suddenly people need to get out of an area quickly. And obviously the subway is not working because the subway is where the shooting happened. And then all of a sudden, people are looking at their phones and there are 8 Uber cars nearby, and it takes $700 to get off the block. All of a sudden, all the inefficiencies sort of crash into each other, and you have this what feels like, I think, a very dystopic outcome. I'm rambling. I hope my point is being made here. I hope the processes which make for good and efficient market distribution of resources are good when everything up to it functions, but redundancies are very important for civic functionality. Public transportation is one of those things. You don't know if a disaster is, oh God, can you imagine if another 9/11 happened today? Can you imagine what the Uber surge pricing would be there as people are trying to get out of like the neighborhoods shrouded in dust and, I don't know, asbestos or whatever? I mean, God, and technically, is this Uber's fault? I mean, all they're really doing is adhering to the very, very basic market principles that you would expect a company to. And what's more, it's not like taxis would be better in this respect. Like, there are a finite number of Uber cars in the area. No matter what these cars are priced at, there are only so many people who are going to get an Uber ride out from the site of a mass shooting. Pricing them higher is, well, It's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the available number of rides. It only ensures those rides go to the people who have the most money or are the most desperate. And I guess that's kind of the thing, isn't it, right? I mean, that's the whole point of increasing price in response to increased demand. It goes the wealthiest or the people who are most desperate. There's got to be a better way. My head hurts. I'm just going to take some medicine. I hope you get the point. Anyway, the shooting was a tragedy, and I sincerely hope those who were critically wounded make it out of this alive. The news story that I'm looking at right here reports no casualties, but by the time this gets uploaded, it's possible that there have been some. Is this the most recent article that I can use? At least 10 people shot, at least 29 people injured. I don't see a death. That's good. Hopefully it stays that way.